I'm Callista, and let me tell you something. Being underestimated is one thing. People do it all the time, especially when they see someone quiet, someone who works behind the scenes. But being erased from the very success you built with your own hands, that's a completely different level of betrayal. For years, I devoted everything to building my family's company. Late nights turned into early mornings, weekends disappeared into strategy meetings and code revisions, and every sacrifice I made went into turning a fragile startup into a $60 million empire. Yet the moment the company finally began to thrive, my sister stood in front of the world, called me useless, and took everything I had created. My own father stood behind her decision without hesitation. They assumed I would walk away quietly, accept the insult, and disappear. But they overlooked one very important fact. I was the reason Vec existed at all. The instant they turned their backs on me, I made a decision. If they were determined to push me out, then they would have to watch me take everything back, piece by piece. I sat staring at my computer screen, barely breathing, my fingers frozen above the keyboard as the echo of my sister's voice replayed in my mind. On the screen, the live stream continued. The sleek conference stage looked like something pulled straight from a Tech Summit commercial. A polished steel backdrop reflected soft white lights, while banners displaying the Vec logo hung proudly behind the podium. And right there at the center of it all stood Sienna. She looked flawless under the spotlights, perfectly styled, perfectly composed. She carried that effortless confidence that made audiences believe every word she spoke without question. "With strategic leadership," she said smoothly into the microphone, "we transformed Vec into a powerhouse of innovation." She smiled as if she were sharing a private victory with the crowd. "When I took over the company's key initiatives, we were struggling to keep up with competitors. Now we're not just surviving, we're leading the industry." My stomach twisted. We. The words scraped against my ears like broken glass. I had spent 10 years building that company from nothing. I wrote the core algorithms that powered our entire platform. I negotiated our earliest contracts when nobody else believed in the technology. I stayed awake through endless nights rewriting code, debugging systems, refining the architecture that made our software faster and smarter than anything else on the market. While I was locked in my office doing the real work, Sienna had been busy building a polished corporate resume somewhere else. Yet now, in front of millions of viewers watching the broadcast, she had rewritten history and erased me from it completely. Beside her sat Magnus, our father and the official founder of Vec. He leaned back comfortably in his chair, hands folded in his lap, nodding with quiet approval, as if every word she said was the absolute truth. Truth. That word used to mean something in our family. At least it used to mean something to him. The applause inside the conference hall thundered through my speakers, pulling me out of my thoughts. News outlets have already started running headlines across their websites. Sienna Rohr, the visionary behind Vec's rise. I clenched my fists. Not a single mention of my name.
A few minutes later, my phone buzzed sharply on the desk. Rebecca Holloway's voice came through the speaker the moment I answered, frustration woven into every syllable. "Tell me you saw that." I let out a slow breath. "Oh, I saw it." "She just took credit for everything," Rebecca continued, barely containing her anger. "And your father just sat there and let it happen." I pinched the bridge of my nose, closing my eyes for a moment. "I know." Rebecca lowered her voice slightly. "You have to respond to this, Callista. If you don't push back—" "I need to think," I interrupted, sharper than I intended. "I can't react emotionally." Silence lingered for a second. Then she sighed. "Fine, but don't take too long. The longer that interview sits out there unchallenged, the more people will believe it." The call ended. I checked my messages and saw a short text from Lucas, VC CFO. "You need to get ahead of this before it's too late." My jaw tightened. I scrolled down to Magnus's contact. My thumb hovered above the call button before finally pressing it. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. I slowly placed the phone back on the desk, a heavy pressure settling in my chest. He wasn't just ignoring the situation. He was ignoring me. That evening, I walked into the restaurant feeling like a stranger attending someone else's family dinner. Soft golden lighting filled the room, reflecting off polished mahogany tables, while quiet conversations floated through the air. The faint clinking of silverware mixed with the low hum of diners around us. At the head of the table sat Magnus. Beside him was Sienna. He looked proud. Lorraine, our mother, adjusted the napkin in her lap, and glanced toward me with a flicker of concern that disappeared almost immediately. Sienna smirked as I approached. "Glad you could make it," she said smoothly, raising her glass for a sip of wine. I forced a polite smile and sat down. Wouldn't miss it. The waiter came by to refill everyone's drinks, and for a few minutes the conversation drifted around harmless topics: market trends, investment strategies, future expansion plans. The kind of safe, neutral discussion that passed for normal conversation in our family. But I hadn't come for small talk. Eventually I turned to Sienna. "I saw your interview today." She tilted her head slightly, pretending curiosity. "Oh, and what did you think?" I met her gaze directly. "I think you left something important out." She blinked slowly. "Did I?" "Yes." I placed my glass down carefully. "You forgot to mention that I built the core software, that I negotiated the company's first major contracts, that I worked 14-hour days for years turning VC into what it is." Sienna laughed softly. "Callista, come on. Everyone knows you're brilliant. But leadership isn't just about technical skills. It's about vision, strategy. People need someone they can trust as the face of the company." My fingers curled slightly against my palm. "And you think that person is you?" She shrugged with practiced innocence. "I didn't say that. But perception is everything." Magnus cleared his throat. His hand rested gently on our mother's arm, as if quietly signaling that she shouldn't speak. "Let's not turn dinner into a business discussion," he said lightly, though his tone left no room for disagreement. I turned toward him, searching his expression for some trace of support. "Dad, you know what I did for this company." His face remained neutral. "Sienna's doing a great job," he said calmly. "That's what matters." The words knocked the breath from my lungs. That's what matters. Not fairness. Not truth. Not the decade of sacrifices I had poured into VC. Sienna leaned back in her chair, clearly satisfied. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I refused to let her see me fall apart. Slowly, I placed a napkin on the table and pushed my chair back. "You're right," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let's not talk about business." I stood. My mother looked at me uncertainly. "Leaving already?" Sienna's voice carried a hint of amusement. I looked at her calmly. "I have work to do." Then I turned and walked away, my head held high, even as the weight of their betrayal settled like stone inside my chest. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat at my desk staring at a framed photograph resting on the bookshelf. It was from the early days of VC. Magnus, Sienna, and me standing in front of our first office building. Back then, it was nothing more than a small rented space with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. I remembered how proud I felt that day, how certain I had been that family meant something in business. Now I knew better. I opened my laptop and pulled up the latest financial report for VC. This wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I walked into the office determined to face whatever came next. The memory of last night's dinner still sat heavily in my chest, but I refused to let it slow me down. The sleek glass lobby of VC buzzed with activity. Employees moved quickly between desks and conference rooms, their conversations dropping to whispers as they noticed me walking through. Something felt wrong. I stepped toward the elevators, gripping my coffee cup a little tighter. Over the years, my instincts had become sharp, almost impossible to ignore. And right now, they were screaming at me. Before I could press the elevator button, Rebecca appeared around the corner. Her expression was tense. "Callista." One look at her face made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "There's an emergency board meeting happening right now." She hesitated before adding quietly, "Without you." My grip tightened around the coffee cup. "What?" Rebecca lowered her voice. "Sienna called the meeting. No one informed you." Of course they hadn't. I turned immediately, my heels striking sharply against the marble floor as I walked toward the executive wing. My pulse pounded in my ears. The walls of VC had never felt suffocating before, but now they seemed to close around me like a trap. I pushed open the heavy boardroom doors without knocking. The room fell silent. Sienna stood at the head of the long oak table, her perfectly manicured hands resting on the polished surface. She looked completely in control, completely at ease. Around the table sat the board members. Magnus was there too. His expression gave nothing away. Sienna smiled. "Callista, I was just about to call you in." I glanced down at the stack of papers spread across the table. It was already done. Whatever decision they had made had already been signed. I folded my arms. "What's going on?" Sienna tilted her head. "VC has grown far beyond its startup phase.
We need leadership that understands high-level corporate strategy. Someone with extensive business experience. My pulse spiked. And you think that person is you? Nathan Pierce, one of the board members, and apparently now fully aligned with Sienna, cleared his throat. The board has already voted. He looked down at the documents. Callista, you're being transitioned out of leadership. The air seemed to leave my lungs. I turned toward my father. Dad. Magnus exhaled slowly and looked away. Maybe this is for the best, Callista. There it was. The final blow. I had given years of my life to that company. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my own sanity to build VC into what it had become. And now, with a few calculated moves, Sienna had taken it all. I straightened my shoulders. I wouldn't let them see me break. What exactly is my position now? I asked calmly. Sienna leaned back in her chair, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. You can stay on as a senior consultant. Your technical skills are still valuable, just not in leadership. My nails pressed into my palm. Not in leadership. The humiliation sank deep. It wasn't just about losing a title. It was about being erased again. I glanced around the table. Some of the board members looked uncomfortable. Others, like Nathan, looked quietly satisfied. No one spoke up for me. Fine. I turned and walked out of the room without another word. Back in my office, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing slowly. Rebecca and Lucas entered a moment later. Concern filled both their faces. Lucas spoke first. Are you okay? No, but I wasn't going to say that. I exhaled slowly. Pack up my things. Rebecca's eyes widened. Callista, you don't have to. I'm not giving Sienna the satisfaction of dragging this out. They exchanged a glance before nodding. As I gathered my belongings, I paused one last time to look out the office window. Seattle's skyline stretched across the horizon, alive with movement and possibility. They thought they had won. They believed I was finished.
But as I gripped the steering wheel of my car later that evening, my mind was already moving several steps ahead. If they believed I was done, they were very wrong. The invitation arrived later that night, a thick cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering, Magnus's 70th birthday celebration, a lavish event scheduled at one of Seattle's most exclusive hotels, and of course, it was organized by none other than Sienna. Rebecca leaned against my kitchen counter, scanning the invitation before letting out a scoff. You know exactly what this is. I tossed the envelope onto the table. Yeah, a spectacle. She's setting you up, Rebecca said bluntly. This isn't about celebrating Magnus. It's about making you look irrelevant in front of every important person in the city. I knew she was right. Skipping the event would have been easy, but walking away would give Sienna exactly what she wanted, and I wasn't about to hand her that victory. I picked up the invitation again, running my fingers slowly over the embossed lettering on the front. The embossed seal. Rebecca exhaled in frustration. Callista, I won't cause a scene, but I won't let her erase me either. She shook her head, muttering, I hope you know what you're doing. I didn't, but I'd figure it out. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, the air thick with expensive perfume and hushed conversations. Waiters in crisp black suits weaved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne. Sienna was at the center of it all, laughing effortlessly, basking in the attention. Magnus stood beside her, surrounded by business executives and industry leaders. The room was filled with the kind of people who shaped companies with a handshake, who decided fates over a glass of bourbon. The moment I stepped inside, the whispers began. I walked through the crowd, chin high, shoulders squared, refusing to acknowledge the stolen glances and speculative murmurs. Sienna spotted me, her eyes lighting up with something I couldn't quite place. Anticipation? Amusement? Maybe both. She made her way over, her wine glass poised elegantly between her fingers. Glad you could make it, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I wouldn't miss Dad's big night, I replied smoothly. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good, because tonight's going to be memorable. I held her gaze. I don't doubt it. She let out a soft chuckle, like she was in on some private joke. Then with one last knowing glance, she disappeared back into the crowd. A knot twisted in my stomach. Something was about to happen. The clinking of a glass silenced the room. Sienna stood at the front of the ballroom, her expression radiant as she addressed the crowd. Magnus sat beside her, a glass of scotch in hand, watching with quiet approval. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our father," she began, her voice smooth, practiced. "Magnus Rohr is more than just a businessman. He's a visionary, a mentor, a leader." The room erupted in applause. I folded my arms, waiting. "But tonight," she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto mine, "we also look toward the future." A hush fell over the room. "As we celebrate Dad's legacy, I think it's time to share some exciting news about Vec." My breath caught. The company needs strong leadership, and as CEO, I am committed to carrying that vision forward without distraction. I felt the world tilt slightly. Sienna's gaze never left mine as she delivered the final blow. Moving forward, I will be taking full executive control of Vec as its sole leader. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen as the cameras flashed, catching every stunned reaction, every whisper exchanged between guests. This wasn't just an announcement. It was a statement, a carefully crafted public execution of my role in the company. Magnus remained silent, his approval clear in the way he raised his glass. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still, to absorb every detail, every smug glance, every strategic move she had just played. I wasn't just removed, I was humiliated, and Sienna knew it. I felt her watching me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to lash out, to storm out in disgrace. Instead, I took a steady breath and walked forward. I reached Magnus's table, set a small wrapped gift in front of him, and leaned in close. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said quietly. "Hope you enjoy the empire you just handed to her." Then I turned and walked out. The murmurs swelled behind me, but I didn't look back. Not once. I stepped into the cool night air, gripping my purse tightly as I made my way to my car. Sienna had won this round, but she wouldn't win the war. The first thing I did the next morning was dig into Vec's financial reports, and that's when I found it. The smoking gun. Sitting in my apartment, the soft hum of the city outside barely registered as my eyes scanned the files spread across my desk. My laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets, transaction logs, and legal documents that should have made sense, except they didn't. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was reading too much into things, still raw from last night's humiliation. But the more I dug, the more the numbers screamed at me. Something was wrong. Profits had been diverted. Private equity discussions had taken place under the radar. Legal clauses had been carefully worded to conceal their true intent. And then I found the name, Ethan Wells, a corporate predator, a man who didn't just buy companies, he gutted them, stripping them for every last profitable piece before discarding the remains. My stomach twisted. Sienna wasn't just consolidating power. She was preparing to sell Vec out from under me. Worse, Magnus was backing her. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I drove across the city to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter with each mile. The betrayal was no longer just professional. It was personal. Lorraine answered the door, her face etched with worry the moment she saw me. "Callista," she said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." I stepped inside, my pulse drumming in my ears. "How long have you known?" She sighed, shutting the door behind me. "Your father didn't want me to say anything." I scoffed. Of course he didn't. We moved to the living room, where she perched on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "Magnus believes this is the best move for the company. He thinks Ethan Wells can take Vec to the next level." I let out a sharp laugh. "Ethan Wells doesn't take companies to the next level, Mom. He dismantles them." Lorraine flinched, but didn't argue. I leaned forward, my voice tight. Did Dad even fight for me, or did he just hand Sienna the keys and tell her to lock me out? She looked away, her silence answering the question. I sat back, exhaling slowly. I can't let this happen. Lorraine's gaze snapped to mine. "Please don't make this a war, Callista. Your father believes he's doing the right thing." I shook my head. "Nah, he's doing what's easy. There's a difference." Her lips pressed together, her eyes pleading. "You could start over, walk away from this and build something new." I stood. This is mine. I already built it once, and I'll be damned if I let Sienna burn it to the ground. Lorraine didn't stop me as I left. She knew there was no turning back now. That night, I met Lucas Carter in the shadowed corner of a quiet restaurant. He looked uneasy, glancing around as he slid into the booth across from me. This isn't a good idea. I ignored his nerves. The deal isn't finalized yet, is it? He hesitated. No, but it will be soon. How soon? A matter of days. A sharp pang of urgency shot through me. Lucas lowered his voice. Ethan Wells has been circling for months. Sienna has been playing the long game, making sure everything lines up perfectly before closing the sale. I clenched my jaw. She's selling Vec like it's a used car. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what you're planning, Callista, but if you want to stop this, you need leverage. You need something bigger than just knowing the deal exists. I nodded. Then I guess I'd better find it. I returned home just before midnight, exhaustion tugging at my limbs, but my mind refused to rest. I poured a drink, letting the ice clink against the glass as I stared out at the city skyline. I had spent years thinking of myself as an innovator, a builder, someone who created solutions. But tonight, I wasn't a builder. I was a strategist. Sienna thought she had outplayed me, that I would fold, pack up, and leave quietly. She didn't realize I wasn't the same woman she had blindsided in that boardroom. I pulled up my private files, records, patents, assets she didn't even know existed. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, a slow smirk curling at my lips. You want to play dirty, Sienna? I whispered. Let's see who wins. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone. The first call would go to Nathan Pierce, the man Sienna thought she had in her pocket. Nathan hesitated when he answered, but I didn't give him a chance to speak first. We need to talk now. There was a long pause before he exhaled sharply. Callista, this isn't a good time. I ignored that. The conference room at the Oxford Meta, 30 minutes. He started to protest, but I hung up before he could make an excuse. By the time I arrived at the hotel's private lounge, Nathan was already there, shifting nervously in his chair. He looked like a man who had a lot to lose. I sat down across from him, pulling a folder from my bag and sliding it across the table. I assume you recognize these. His face paled as he glanced at the pages. Financial transactions, private communication logs, a web of bribes and promises, all leading back to Sienna. His fingers twitched as he pushed the folder away. This doesn't prove anything. I leaned in. Cut the act, Nathan. I know Sienna has been buying board members for months. The only thing I don't know is how much she paid you to betray me. He swallowed hard, but his eyes flickered with something close to guilt. You can't win this, he muttered. She's covered every angle. The board is already on her side. I gave him a slow, measured smile. Then it's time to change the game. I didn't waste time. By the afternoon, I was standing outside Sienna's office, my fingers tapping against the manila folder I had brought with me. The assistant gave me a wary glance. Miss Rohr is in a meeting. I'll wait. The door opened moments later, and Sienna appeared, a satisfied smirk on her face, until she saw me. Let me guess, she drawled. You're here to whine about your tragic downfall? I stepped inside without being invited, dropping the file onto her desk. She barely glanced at it before crossing her arms. And you think this scares me? I met her gaze without flinching. If you keep pushing, I'll make sure the entire boardroom turns against you, Sienna. Lorraine laughed. The board? Oh, Callista, the board loves me. Only as long as they think you can protect them, I countered. What happens when they realize you're the reason Vec is on the verge of collapse? For the first time, her smirk wavered. I didn't need her to react. Not yet. I had planted the seed of doubt, and that was enough. That evening, Magnus called. Dinner my place. Now. I should have ignored him, but part of me still wanted to believe he had some decency left. When I arrived, Lorraine greeted me at the door, her face tight with unspoken worry. Magnus sat at the dining table, a glass of scotch in front of him. You need to stop. I let out a breathless laugh. That's why you called me here. I'm trying to keep this family together, he said. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. You don't get to say that, not after what you did. He ran a hand down his face. It's just business, Callista. The words snapped something inside me. No, I said quietly, my voice like steel. It's my life's work. It's my name, my legacy, my future. You handed everything to Sienna before I even had a chance to fight for it. Magnus sighed, rubbing his temple. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I pushed my chair back, standing slowly. Then I'll handle it like business. And I promise you, you're not going to like the outcome. Lorraine flinched as I turned and walked out, but she didn't stop me. She knew nothing could back up. Back at my apartment, Rebecca, Lucas, and Samuel were already waiting. I placed my laptop on the table, flipping open the screen. Sienna thinks she has this locked down. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Does she? I met his gaze, my lips curling into a knowing smile. Not anymore. I took a breath, letting the moment settle. Tomorrow, we start tearing her empire apart. The first move was already in motion. I just had to watch it play out. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively against the nightstand. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen. Turn on the news, she said, the moment I answered, her voice tight with urgency. A cold sensation crept down my spine as I grabbed the remote and flipped to the business channel. My own face stared back at me from the screen, but the headline made my stomach turn. Disgraced former CEO Callista Rohr's questionable leadership led to Vex instability. I sat up straighter, eyes scanning the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Internal sources say Callista Rohr failed to adapt to market trends, leading to stagnation and innovation. Employees question her management style. Was she ever really fit to lead? Every line hit like a hammer. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the news feeds. It was everywhere. Articles, opinion pieces, tweets, dissecting my failure. Every tech blog, every finance column, it was all the same. Sienna had done it. She had launched a full-blown smear campaign, feeding the media false narratives to bury me. I clenched my jaw, my blood simmering beneath my skin. Fine. She wanted a war, she'd get one. By noon, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let Sienna control the story. If she wanted to drag my name through the mud, she was going to have to look me in the eye while she did it. I picked up my phone and dialed Lucas. Where's Sienna right now? Speaking at the Northwest Tech Summit, he answered. Panel discussion on leadership and corporate ethics. I almost laughed at the irony. Get me a seat, I said. The conference room was packed. Industry elites, reporters, executives. All eyes were fixed on the stage.
Where Sienna sat poised and confident, I stood at the back, waiting. Sienna was mid-sentence when I made my move. When the panel opened for audience questions, I stepped forward. Callista Rohr, the moderator announced, looking surprised as the room collectively turned toward me. Sienna's expression faltered for just a second before she forced her signature smirk. I took the mic, keeping my tone calm and steady. Since my sister is talking about transparency, maybe she can explain why she manipulated the media with false narratives. The room tensed. Reporters sat up straighter, pens poised. Camera operators zoomed in. Sienna's fingers curled slightly on the armrest of her chair, but she didn't let the mask slip. I'm not sure what you mean, she said smoothly. I held up my phone, where an article headline glowed from the screen. Multiple sources, I said, arching a brow. Care to name them, or do they only exist in your PR team's imagination? A few murmurs spread through the audience. Sienna's jaw tensed. I don't control the media, don't you? I tilted my head. You do control Vex Communications team, don't you? The tension in the room was electric. For the first time in this fight, Sienna wasn't controlling the narrative. The moment the panel ended, I followed her backstage. She stormed into the green room, slamming the door shut behind her. What the hell was that? I crossed my arms. That was me reminding you that I'm not going anywhere. Her nostrils flared. You just made a fool of yourself in front of the entire industry. No, I said, stepping closer. I made you look like a liar in front of the entire industry. She scoffed. You can't win, Callista. No one cares about the truth. They care about the story that gets the most clicks. Then I'll give them a better story. Sienna's confidence wavered for half a second before she straightened her shoulders. You should have stayed out of my way. Or what? I shot back. You'll try to destroy me again? The silence between us was razor sharp. Security stepped in before things could escalate further, ushering us to separate exits. I didn't care. I had done what I came to do. That night, back in my office, I gathered my team. Rebecca, Lucas, Samuel, all of them, ready for whatever came next. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents, proof of Sienna's backdoor deals, her manipulation tactics, her underhanded schemes. Lucas glanced at them, then up at me. You're really going after her now, aren't you? I met his gaze, my voice steady. Now, let's make her regret ever underestimating me. And the first step? Taking away the one thing Sienna thought was untouchable, Vex Core software. I leaned back in my chair, fingers drumming against the polished oak desk as Lucas finished going over the final details. It's airtight, he said, pushing a set of documents toward me. Allura Systems owns the software outright. The licensing contract with Vec was never renewed. Sienna either didn't notice or was too busy playing the media to care. I picked up the papers, skimming through the legal jargon that confirmed what I already knew. Sienna had made a critical mistake. I exhaled slowly, a smirk playing at the corner of my lips. Then, let's remind her who really built this company. Rebecca, sitting across from me, raised an eyebrow. You know this is going to cause absolute chaos, right? That's the point, I said smoothly. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. At precisely 9 a.m., the first call came in. I watched the chaos unfold from the comfort of my office, sipping my coffee as the first ripple of panic spread across Vectech's headquarters. The company's entire infrastructure, billing systems, client data access, internal management software, suddenly went dark. Within minutes, phone lines were jammed, emails flooded in from frantic executives, investors demanded explanations. By 9:10 a.m., Sienna stormed into Vec's IT department, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. "What the hell is going on?" she snapped. Technicians scrambled to explain, but the answer was staring her right in the face. A single notification blinked ominously on the main server screen. License agreement with Allura Systems expired. Access revoked. Sienna's face went pale. No, 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 she muttered, frantically typing at the keyboard, as if sheer willpower could override the system lockout. But it was done. She had lost control of the one thing that had made Vec valuable, and I was the only person who could fix it. By noon, the boardroom was in a state of complete chaos. The emergency meeting had been called, and for once, Sienna wasn't in control. Board members argued, their voices overlapping. Magnus sat in the corner, silent, his hands clasped in front of him. Sienna stood at the center of it all, her confidence shaken for the first time. "We can fix this," she insisted, but the desperation in her voice was obvious. Nathan, the same man who had once dismissed me, turned to her sharply. "How? How do you fix this?" He gestured toward the report stacked in front of him. "Do you even realize what just happened? We've lost millions in revenue today alone." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then a board member spoke up. "Get Callista in here, now." I took my time. By the time I arrived at Vec's offices, the energy had shifted. No smug looks, no whispers, just silence as I walked through the halls, my presence commanding attention in a way it never had before. When I entered the boardroom, all eyes turned to me. Sienna, standing at the head of the table, was barely holding it together. She squared her shoulders, trying to summon the arrogance she wore like armor. "If this is some kind of stunt," I held up a hand, silencing her. "Let's not waste time," I said evenly. "You want my software, then you'll meet my terms." A murmur ran through the board. Sienna scoffed, folding her arms. "You think you can just hold this company hostage?" "No," I said, tilting my head. "I know I can." Her expression darkened. Across the table, Magnus exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something close to respect in his eyes. Sienna, however, was shaking with bare, contained fury. "You think you can waltz in here and demand?" I leaned forward, my voice firm. "You have 24 hours to decide, or I walk away for good." The next morning, the choice would be clear. Vec belonged to me, or it belonged to no one. I walked into the boardroom with steady steps, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my face unreadable. The room was tense, the air thick with uncertainty. Sienna was already there, pacing near the head of the table, her nails digging into her palm. Her confidence from days before had eroded into something fragile, something desperate. The board members sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact with her. Even Nathan Pierce, the man who once took her bribes without hesitation, sat with his arms folded, his expression stony. The numbers had spoken for themselves. Vec was bleeding, clients were in a panic, investors were pulling out, and the stock had plummeted overnight. And the reason? Sienna. Her recklessness, her arrogance, her failure. I took my seat across from her, meeting her furious gaze with nothing but calm. The chairman cleared his throat. "We all know why we're here." His voice was heavy, his words deliberate.
"This company is on the verge of collapse, and we need to make a decision now." Sienna sat up straighter, forcing a smile. "We can recover from this. I have a plan." Nathan cut her off, his voice sharp. "A plan? You mean the same kind of plan that got us into this mess?" He shook his head. "We need leadership that knows what they're doing. Callista is the only one who can fix this." The words struck like a hammer. Sienna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, she realized she had lost. I turned my gaze to Magnus. For once, he looked tired. The weight of his choices, his blind loyalty, The empire he had so carelessly handed over to Sienna, it all sat on his shoulders, dragging him down. The silence stretched between us. Then finally he sighed. "I thought you were ready," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. He didn't look at me. He looked at Sienna. "But you weren't. You let your pride destroy everything." Sienna inhaled sharply, shaking her head in disbelief. "Dad, I trusted you." Magnus continued, his tone edged with disappointment. "And you failed." Tears welled in Sienna's eyes. "No, you can't do this." His gaze hardened. "I already have." He turned to the board, straightening his shoulders. "Callista takes full control, effective immediately." The gavel came down. The decision was made. Sienna didn't move. She sat frozen, staring at nothing as the world crumbled around her. I watched as the color drained from her face, her lips trembling. Then suddenly she shot up from her chair, her breath ragged. "You ruined me." Before I could react, she lunged. Her nails scraped against my arm before security stepped in, grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her back. She thrashed, her hair wild, her voice cracking as she screamed. "This was supposed to be mine," she sobbed. "I did everything right. I was supposed to win." Her wails echoed in the cold, sterile boardroom. No one moved. No one defended her, not even Magnus. Sienna collapsed to her knees, her cries raw, her shoulders shaking violently. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger toward her. I just felt nothing. Magnus approached me as I gathered my things. His face had aged a decade overnight. His hands, once steady, now trembled at his sides. "You were always the smarter one," he murmured. I should have seen it sooner. I met his tired gaze. I had waited my entire life to hear those words, and now they meant nothing. I nodded once. That was all he was getting from me. Then I turned, walking out of the boardroom, out of my father's shadow, out of my past, stepping into my rightful place. As I entered my office, I exhaled slowly. The war was over, but was the victory worth it? A week later, I found myself staring at an unopened gift, a birthday present I never got to give Magnus. It sat on my desk, wrapped in silver paper, the ribbon slightly crushed from being tossed aside. I had bought it weeks ago, back when I still believed there was a chance, however small, that my father would see me, acknowledge me, maybe even be proud of me. But that moment never came. Now it was just another relic of the past. Vec was finally stabilizing under my leadership. Employees walked the halls with cautious relief, knowing the chaos of Sienna's reign was over. The panic had subsided. Clients returned. The company's stock was already showing signs of recovery. Lucas leaned against the doorframe of my office, arms crossed. "The numbers are looking solid. Investors are satisfied. Looks like you pulled off the impossible," Rebecca grinned. "You saved the company, boss. You should be celebrating." I nodded, forcing a small smile. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was exhaustion. I glanced back at the unopened gift. Winning didn't erase the loss. I visited my mother for the first time since the fallout. Lorraine opened the door slowly, as if she had been expecting me but wasn't sure how to welcome me. "Come in," she said softly. The house was quiet. No signs of Magnus, no lingering echoes of old arguments. "He's retired," Lorraine said, answering my unspoken question. "He barely leaves the house." I exhaled. "And Sienna?" She hesitated. "Gone. She left Seattle. Battle? I don't know where." I wasn't surprised. Sienna had built her identity on being the face of success. Now that she had lost everything, she had nowhere to hide, except in obscurity. Lorraine looked at me, her eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. "You proved them all wrong," she said. "But was it worth it?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure myself. The email came the next morning. Subject: invitation to speak. Brentwood Business School, Sienna's alma mater. They wanted me to deliver a keynote speech at their upcoming graduation ceremony. The topic: the power of underestimated leaders. I leaned back in my chair, reading the words again. It was poetic in a way. I accepted. Not out of spite, not to rub it in, but because success was the only closure I needed. The skyline stretched before me, the city bathed in golden morning light. I stood at the window of my new office, watching the world move forward. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. I thought back to the girl I used to be, the one who spent nights coding in a tiny apartment building, something no one believed in. I closed my eyes, whispering to the ghost of my past self. We made it. Then I turned away from the past, stepping into the future.
Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. For years, I let others define my worth. I let my father's favoritism, my sister's betrayals, and the doubts of those around me chip away at what I knew I was capable of. But here's the truth. No one is coming to hand you the life you deserve. You have to take it. You have to fight for it. This story wasn't just about business. It was about standing your ground when the world tells you to step aside. It was about resilience, about refusing to let anyone erase your contributions, and about knowing your own value, whether or not anyone else sees it. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had someone tell you that you weren't good enough, smart enough, or strong enough? How did you respond? Because in the end, it's not about what they say. It's about what you do next. If this story resonated with you, if it struck a chord, let me know. Drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, I want to hear your story. Let's connect, share, and lift each other up. And of course, if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and powerful, hit that subscribe button. Your journey isn't over, and neither is ours. Let's keep going.